Story 1. I had one. My mom agonized about it for a while but felt she had no choice. She could not leave me at home because I kept running off. Turns out I loved my leash because I got to pretend to be a dog. Her embarrassment about that was greater than her embarrassment about having a child on a leash. I turned out fine. Story 2. I once witnessed a little girl get hit by a car at a very busy outdoor mall. She was excited to get ice cream as she left a store and did not look both ways. She was around 2 or 3 years old. After that, I never judged a parent who used a leash for their child. The terror on the mother's face was awful. Story 3. I was going to pretend to be a dog anyway, whether I was on a leash or not. I did not care. Story 4. My dignity may have suffered a blow, but it sure beats being run over by a car. Story 5. I had baby reins because I ran off a lot. My parents were basically afraid, probably rightly, that I would end up killing myself as I had no fear at 3 and would regularly ignore safety advice. Baby reins were very common when I was little and no one thought twice about seeing children in them. We used them for our children because they too were runners and escape artists. Story 6. The only person I knew was a mother of a girl with autism. It may seem cruel, but the reason she acted that way was that her daughter had a tendency, apparently common in many autistic children, to wander off. She was the mother of 4, so she could not always hold the girl's hand. The behavior has a name: elopement. She told me she was glad because her daughter had sometimes almost walked into traffic or into open elevator doors and then become lost. That only happened when she was very young and remained nonverbal for about a year longer than most. She is doing fine now. Story 7. As a child, I was very friendly to strangers and loved to wander off. After one of my wanderings, I returned with a present a stranger had bought me. My mother bought me a bracelet attached to a coiled cord like the one on our landline phone. I am grateful she prevented me from being kidnapped. Story 8. I thought they were stupid until I had a child who was a runner and wanderer. Now I completely understand them. Story 9. My mother used baby leashes on all of us. I decided not to use one on my 18-month-old nephew the first time we went to the zoo. She told me I would regret it. When he bolted and I caught him as he leaped toward the penguin enclosure, she pulled out the leash she had brought, and I quickly put it on him. Some kids need them for their own safety. Story 10. I do not understand why anyone is against them. They are normal and have been used for centuries. You can see them in drawings and paintings dating to around 1600. They used to be called leading strings, and toddlers had them built into their clothing. They were attached to an adult woman's apron. That is the origin of the saying that an immature person is still tied to their mother's apron strings. Toddlers tend to bolt, and even before cars existed it was dangerous for them to run off. Story 11. I fully support baby leashes. Many more people should use them. Story 12. I was not put on a leash as a baby, but I understand why some parents use child safety harnesses. People who judge them are likely the same people who would judge them for taking their eyes off their children for a brief second if something happened. Story 13. My son is alive and well, sitting beside me instead of flattened on the road. Story 14. I use them for my toddler, particularly in crowded places. She is great at holding my hand, but she has a habit of stealing people's walking sticks and attempting to walk their dogs. Story 15. Our daughter did not like the stroller, refused to hold hands or be carried, and she was fast. The solution was a plush monkey backpack with a zipper pocket for the treat of her choice, buckled across her chest, and its tail served as the leash. She loved it. She is 21 now and asked about the monkey leash the other day. I am pretty sure it is tucked away in a memory box somewhere. Story 16. I am glad I did not die when I ran into the street unexpectedly at age 3. I now use one on my son. Story 17. My kid had a monkey backpack. It allowed him some freedom from a stroller or being held, but he could not get far. We only used it once at the zoo when he was in that I-do-it-myself stage. He is a well-adjusted 18-year-old high school senior who is probably a mama's boy, but he does not seem traumatized by it. Additional note: mama's boy means his mother taught him to treat women with respect and to defend them against boys who did not learn that lesson. Story 18. My brother had one. He is autistic and was really good at slipping away and hiding. Many malls went into semi-lockdown because of him in the 1990s. He has grown into a functioning adult and works as an engineer. No harm, only benefits. Story 19. People who are against them have never had to deal with children who are prone to running into traffic. Story 20. Interestingly, my grown son, who has a toddler, and I talked about this the other day. We had just taken her to the mall and were in Old Navy buying clothes when she suddenly disappeared for 5 seconds. We found her hiding behind a stack of clothes. If a simple harness could keep that wondrous little girl safe, I do not see the harm in it. In fact, I never saw the harm to begin with and always found people's concerns about toddler harnesses puzzling. Story 21. My son is 38 years old and wore a baby leash when he was around 2 to 3 years old because he loved to dart into the road or run in the aisles when I went shopping. He was a big baby, 10 pounds 2 ounces and 22.5 inches at birth, so putting him in the cart was backbreaking. He has fully recovered. Story 22. What is there to feel about it? Kids that age are either strapped into a stroller, carried in a backpack, or attached to a leash. At least those children got to walk and learn how to be safely independent. Story 23. I was a child who was kept on a leash. I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder so severe that a doctor once told my parents I would never go to a normal school. I am now a partner in a large law firm and the parent of a feral toddler. He is brilliant, funny, and adorable, but he never runs out of energy. He only knows 0 meaning asleep and 100 meaning literally every waking moment. Story 24. My child is doing great. They are grown and in their 30s. I used Velcro wristbands, one attached to their wrist and the other to mine, connected by a long leash. James Patrick Bulger was almost the same age as my child had been, 2 years old, when he was lured from a shopping center and murdered by 2 10-year-olds. After that, I made sure never to lose track of my child while shopping. Story 25. Fine. I cannot remember it, and I guess it kept me safe. They are called reins, and they come in cute little backpack styles now. I still think they are okay. Story 26. It turns out I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. As an adult, I'm still prone to wandering off, so the leash was for the best. Story 27. After having 2 amazingly fun kids, I get it. If my mom hadn't kept me on a literal leash, I probably wouldn't have survived childhood. Story 28. We used to make fun of those parents when I was in my early 20s. Now, having a brave-ass hellion of a toddler, I fucking get it. Story 29. Nothing happened to the children because they were never able to wander off and get hurt. The criticism that baby leashes are cruel is a farce. They keep children safe and give parents a way to offer a sense of freedom while maintaining control. Story 30. I never thought anything was wrong with those. Yes, they looked kind of funny, but they let the child explore without anyone having to grab or wrench the child's hand. They were not suitable in every circumstance, but I never saw any harm in them. Story 31. When I was 9, I would get lost in the mall. I almost always ended up in the video game department at KB Toys. One day my dad decided he was not going to tolerate that, and the next time we went to the mall he put a dog leash around my neck. That was strange and embarrassing. I sing in a hardcore punk band now. Story 32. I did not know that I was one until my mother told me when I was an adult. Children go through a stage when they do not want to be in a stroller, and it is hard to keep their arms raised to hold hands all day. People who judge this kind of behavior are not primary caregivers, or they have not been primary caregivers for decades. Story 33. My brother, older than me and born in the early 1960s, was a wanderer. They did not have child safety devices then, so my mother bought a large collar, put it around his waist, and attached a leash. People said terrible things to her about it, but she said she would rather be yelled at than have a dead child. Before that, if she turned away for a moment, he would be gone. He had frightened her too many times, so she came up with that solution. Story 34. My 18-year-old daughter is alive and well after I leashed her. I started doing this after she ran away at the zoo and I nearly had a heart attack while looking for her. She is not neurotypical. Story 35. Rugrat harnesses? I love them, They need to make a comeback. Put on vests with compartments like those service dogs use so parents do not have to carry a bag. Story 36. The only time I ever saw them was at Disneyland, and I would a million times rather see a child on a leash than hear about a child being kidnapped or lost. I doubt any of those children cared about their leashes one bit. Story 37. I was a leash kid and I grew up fine. At least whatever is wrong with me has nothing to do with wearing the super happy funtime backpack. Story 38. Pleasantly surprised by these comments. Normalize keeping your kids safe. Story 39. My son, who wore a leash to keep him from darting into the street every chance he got, is now 21, in college, and a well-adjusted, cool person. To answer your question, I think the baby leash did its job since he survived. Story 40. I was a runner and a hider as a child and had no concept of when it was appropriate. I played spontaneous hide and seek for years with no self-control. Looking back, it was probably attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, but it was the early 1990s and I was a girl, so no one really knew much about how it presented in girls. In any case, I thought the absolute funniest thing in the world was to hide in clothing racks at stores and make my mother panic. So I earned a leash. It had Big Bird on it, so I tolerated it but was not happy about it. Once I was older, bringing a book helped keep me from running off out of boredom. With further maturity, I was happy to visit the bookstore on shopping trips and tolerated the boring parts as long as I could browse books. Now I feel fine about it. I have my own runner, a 6-year-old son, and I have had to use a leash with him. Once children are too big for even large kid strollers and too young for self-control to develop, and if they have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, they could be gone in an instant for the dopamine rush of boredom. He was not happy about wearing it, but we had many safety conversations. As he gets older, it is easier to calm him, help him communicate his feelings with words, and keep him interested on a boring shopping trip by playing silly games. I will never judge a mother with her child on a leash. Manufacturers make safe options in many colors, characters, and patterns to suit a child's interests. There is nothing wrong with keeping a child from wandering off and getting hurt, walking into traffic, being taken by someone, falling into a gorilla enclosure, or pulling shelving on top of themselves. Some children do not have the instinct to cling to a caregiver for safety. They may be bored or tired and want to get away, and then bad things can happen. Story 41. I was born in 1986. My 2 older siblings did not get leashed, but I did. I had a perfectly lovely childhood, but I was a runner. I would run away as a game at every chance. I would also convince other small children to dart with me when the adults were distracted, and I loved to chat with strangers. I laugh about it with my friends and bring it up as a humorous snippet of my childhood. I understand why it was used in my case. Story 42. We did not use a leash on our child, but once at an amusement park she stood behind us in line to buy frozen lemonade when a woman thought she was a lost child. The woman grabbed her, ran to the vendor and announced, "I found this lost child." We looked and said, "Hey kiddo, what are you doing being carried by that woman?" We joke that she never gets lost, but sometimes gets found. I guess a leash would have helped then. Story 43. Feel fine about it. The dog comparison is more apt than its critics think. I care about my dog too and know she is prone to behavior that could harm her, so I also leash her because I love her. Story 44. They probably feel relieved not to have been lost as a child. Story 45. I am an elementary teacher and fully support the use of harnesses in chaotic or crowded situations. A child's safety is more important than appearances. Overparenting can occur, but it can be addressed individually. When used as intended, harnesses are a good idea. Story 46. I was a child who used a leash. I preferred it to holding someone's hand or being confined. I plan to use one with my own child because my memories of it are so positive. I do not care if people judge. Story 47. I was on a leash for a year or two in public places. Of all the things I have harbored anger about toward my parents, that is not one of them. I have severe attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. If I was placed in a stroller or my hand was held, I screamed. When I was let loose, I ran like Usain Bolt. Probably saved me from being kidnapped, which makes me laugh out loud. Story 48. My siblings had to wear them. I had a wrist one I wore occasionally because my brother needed one even though I was reasonably attentive and reliable. It did not really bother us. I think it is a decent tool for helping a child get used to being in public while walking somewhat independently until you can reasonably be sure they will not bolt into the street. They get a bad rap, and that is completely unfair. Story 49. I never understood the controversy. If a playpen is no worse than a carrier or cage for a pet, why did baby leashes receive so much criticism? Story 50. One of my first jobs was at a booth in the main mall in my city. I saw parents using those things on their kids every day and thought it was terrible. I went on a rant to my mother one day about how awful these people were for treating their children like pets. My mother then told me that she leashed me as a child because I would escape any other restraint and run off. I did not yet realize I could die. I have no memory of it, but I understand now. Story 51. I used backpack leashes on both my boys. They are now 19 and 13 and are still on leashes. I let them use a runner chain at night so they can bound around and get some exercise. Story 52. My mother used one when she had a son and then twins. I remember she had an argument with a woman who made a rude comment. My mother told the story, and I guess her iris showed. Story 53. I have very positive memories, but I would be way too scared to use one for a child now because of how harshly they are judged. Story 54. We had a backpack shaped like a teddy bear for our son. He didn't even remember it, but it kept him safe because he constantly ran off. Once he stopped running away, we stopped using it. We mainly used it on vacations, in airports, and in other potentially dangerous places. Story 55. My mom used to do that. I think it is a good idea for the same reason people keep their dogs on leashes. It lets the child walk while keeping the parent in control and prevents the child from running off, causing problems, or getting hurt. Story 56. My third child, at 2 to 3 years old, would 100% bolt into a parking lot at full sprint. She got a leash, and I regret nothing. We also used it at the park with a smart tag attached to the back where the leash clips on. Story 57. I was on a leash, and frankly, it was warranted. I plan to put one on my child too if they wander off and hide like I did. Story 58. My son had a backpack with a leash. He is not dead, and I never had to grab him by the hair to yank him back from being run over, so I would say he is okay. The sore spot on my head made me wish my parents had known about leashes. Story 59. My parents had one for me in the 1980s. It was a duck harness, and I really loved it. I never accidentally fell into an animal habitat at the zoo when I was a kid, so I would call it a win. Story 60. As the mother of a once wily 2-year-old escape artist, I say that if a leash is what it takes to keep your child safe, then yes, go for it. Story 61. These are pretty standard in the United Kingdom. Parents don't feel ashamed using them. We tend to walk a lot more here, and the roads are very busy. Story 62. I always thought this was horrible until I had a daughter. We were at Disney when she was 5 and it started raining. We bought ponchos like everyone else. I took my eyes off her for a second, and when I looked back I saw a sea of children wearing identical ponchos. I found her 30 seconds later, in sheer terror. I bought a leash and never gave it another thought. After that, we bought rain gear from a different store so ours would be a different color than most people's. Story 63. I was one of those kids. I didn't wander off and get abducted, so I can't really complain. Story 64. My first son could run before he was 10 months old, but he did not have the coordination to handle it and fell frequently. He also lacked an understanding of self-preservation at that age, so he needed a harness and reins to keep his face off the pavement and to keep him safe. I became very good at quickly lifting my arm and dangling him like Tom Cruise in Mission Impossible. Story 65. I bought one for my son when he was 2 because I was traveling alone from Australia to Europe. My son was a runner, one moment here and the next in the middle of a busy road. Back home in Europe people judged me, but I did not care. It was a cute panda backpack with an extension. He is now 17 and fine. I trust him not to run onto busy roads anymore. Story 66. I will definitely use them if I have children in the future, especially if they take after me. I get easily distracted, And I know that you cannot take your eyes off a child for 1 second without that child getting into trouble. Story 67. I am short, 4 feet 10 inches to be exact. When I am drunk, I tend to wander. A few weeks ago, I met up with my coworkers for our first in-person work event since 2019, and we drank heavily. Around 1 a.m., in my inebriated stupor, my brain said, "Let's go back to the hotel," and I decided to do it. I walked back alone in the District of Columbia by the wharf. It was only a few doors down, so I did not think anything of it. Imagine my surprise when I woke up to multiple messages on the Slack messaging app asking where the hell I went. They threatened to tie a balloon to me the next night, which I deserved. One last anecdote. I was leashed as a toddler in the 1980s. My Honduran father loved to let me run as far as the lead would allow, and then I would fall on my rear end while he laughed. I cannot get away with that now, I suppose. Story 68. After you have seen a 3-year-old dart into the street between cars and get hit by a truck that had no chance of seeing the child, you do not fault parents for using leashes to keep their children safe. Thankfully, the child made a full recovery. Children are very resilient at that age. Story 69. Oh my goodness. It is for safety sometimes. Would you rather have a missing child? And people say they are treated like dogs? Come on. I was a wild child. I would run away as fast as I could. My mom would literally be in tears. I think she would have gotten me one if they were available then. Story 70. Back in the early 1980s, before these were marketed as a thing, my family went camping at a lake. I was a toddler and the youngest of 4. Our poodle was leashed to a large auger screwed into the ground. Apparently, I took a running leap off a 10-foot embankment into the lake. From then on, I wore the dog harness and was staked out with a kiddie pool while the dog was free. The dog would listen and stay put. I would not. I am not much different today. Whatever my mom had to do to keep me safe, I am down with it, including being staked out in the yard like a poodle. Story 71. My grandmother put a dog leash around my neck. She is dead now, and I am into bondage, discipline, dominance, submission, sadism, and masochism. Story 72. If I have children, they will be wearing those backpack leashes because I will not let them get lost. Story 73. My sister's child had a habit of breaking away from her and running into traffic. I did not really care how it made him feel if it kept him alive. Story 74. I never saw a problem with them, and the back fastening was necessary because my youngest could Houdini his way out of any other harness in 15 seconds. Story 75. I'm surprised this isn't a thing anymore. Children seem to actively seek danger. Story 76. I had reins as a child. I am from the United Kingdom and was slightly younger than James Bulger. After that murder and kidnapping case, many parents rushed to buy them. My son is now 3 years old. From the age of 10 months until he was 2.5 years old, he wore backpack reins when walking on busy roads or in shopping centers. He started walking at 9 months, and by 10 months he could run quite quickly. I used them for road safety in crowds when I was carrying many bags, to save my back from bending repeatedly to hold his hand on long walks, and at train and underground stations. He was able to explore safely, and I would unclip the reins when we arrived at a safe place such as a park or playground. I have no health issues in my 30s. My son no longer has to wear reins and is perfectly fine. We keep a simple wrist rein in the car for emergencies in case we ever break down on the side of a busy road. Story 77. People still use them. If you have a toddler who runs, especially one with autism spectrum disorder, they need them. Story 78. I was that kid in the early 1990s. I joke that my mom found the harness and leash in the pet section at Walmart and laugh every time I see pictures of my dad walking me on family vacations. I did not listen and easily would have run off. I am in my 30s now, so I am glad I was leashed and kept safe. Story 79. It wasn't until I became a parent that I learned about people's opinions of them. As far as I'm concerned, if a child has them on, there's a bloody good reason for it. Story 80. Leash kid here. I 100% condone my mother's decision. I was an absolute pest and I probably would be dead if she had not put me on a leash. Thankfully, now at 35, I can function relatively well without a leash. However, people still tend to grab my shoulder near roads. Story 81. It has always seemed preferable to steer them by their necks. Story 82. My child is 5 now. He wore a leash from ages 2 to 4. He is too fast and too active to be off-leash. He didn't seem to mind. Story 83. I see the children who have the cool-looking ones and feel mildly jealous. They were not as common when I was young. I am not upset. My parents had 3 children under the age of 3, and I tended to wander and slip away. I once caused a museum lockdown and was reported as missing. I could look away for 2 seconds and be 3 aisles over. Fortunately, I knew street safety, so my parents were mainly worried about stranger danger. I believe I outgrew the leash within a year or 2. My wife still complains about my ability to disappear, mostly at the grocery store or at events. There were no lasting effects, and I completely understand why my parents used it. Story 84. As a former leash kid, I am all for them, dude. It is a miracle I am alive. Laughing out loud. Story 85. When my 3 children were all under 5, I used a leash. I did not have enough hands for a car seat, a toddler, and a preschooler. They are all alive and well in their 20s with no memory or trauma from being leashed. Story 86. I was against them until I saw a toddler wriggle out of his father's arms and be hit by a car. Story 87. They were not abducted and are otherwise no different from anyone else. Story 88. My grandson had a small elephant backpack with a leash. He loved it. He thought he was walking us, laughing out loud, much like a little puppy seeing its leash and getting excited to go on a walk. It was so cute and much better than being flattened in a parking lot or on the street, because he would have been. Story 89. I support them for the same reason I put leashes on my dogs. Some children do not have the mental capacity to understand that they should not wander or run after something. If they had that capacity, a leash would not be necessary. Story 90. My child had one for about a year. It was mainly used in outdoor places like the zoo or the park because they were a runner. They quickly outgrew the need, but it allowed them to walk on their own and not be strapped into a stroller, which they disliked. They are 6 now and still fiercely independent. Story 91. Those kids may not look like much, but they never failed to bring those sleds full of diphtheria medications to Nome, Alaska on time, even in the middle of the Yukon winter. Story 92. Honestly, as a kid I hated it, but I didn't understand stranger danger for the life of me. Looking back, I'm blessed my parents put a little leash backpack on me. Between wandering off and treating everyone as my friend, I know my parents were pulling their hair out. I would learn everyone's first name to convince my parents that they were my friends. I had no sense of danger in my little noggin at all. Story 93. I always thought they were horrible until I had my first child. He was a runner who knew no fear and would run straight toward cars, animals, or other people. He is still alive only because he was on a leash. He is now almost 15 and has no memory of being on a leash, so I do not think he experienced any trauma. Story 94. I grew up just fine. In the early 1980s, I wore a leash in the crowded mall and also hid in the middle of the circular clothing racks, giggling to myself while my mother and sisters hunted for me. Now my 22-month-old son wears a leash in crowded places. Story 95. I was one of those kids. Until I was about 5, my mother had one attached to her backpack. I am now 39. I do not remember it and only know about it from a picture. It seems I was a wild child who liked to run. Story 96. I do not even remember it. I have twins who remain very inattentive. Just last week, I watched one walk into a wall because he was talking to his brother. They often ran in different directions. Backpack leashes were a must. Story 97. My mother asked if she could use one when watching my son. He was fast, and she was not confident she could keep up, but they both loved walking in parks. She chose a backpack-style harness so he could put treasures in the cute plush pack, and she had the peace of mind of not losing him. He is 14 now. He spent the day with friends and is home and perfectly well adjusted. Story 98. My daughter used to run off when we walked with her. We went to Myrtle Beach and I decided to get a wrist leash for her. We only used it on that trip and nothing bad happened. She stayed closer to us afterward and no longer wandered off. Story 99. I was a leash kid. I am now learning that I very likely have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and may have autism. I totally get it. I never had any negative feelings about it. My parents likely also have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it kept us from wandering away from each other. Story 100. My mom used it when I was in my terrible twos, and I have no memories of it, traumatic or otherwise. A word to detractors. A baby leash would have kept Harambe alive. Story 101. When he was little, my brother wore a leash because he tended to wander. My mother, two brothers, and I were waiting in line at a pharmacy when we saw a child run off. We looked down and saw the child's leash was still taut. The toddler had attached the leash to a chair so we would not notice. Took all three of us to recapture him. He is in his 30s now, a former Army military police officer, a father, and a productive member of society. Story 102. I wish the leash had worked for one of my children. They were a runner. I had to buckle my child into the grocery cart as tightly as possible without being abusive. I was afraid someone would call the authorities. My child would buck and cry halfway through the grocery store. My child was 3 and I was nearly at my due date, so I could not chase and pick them up while they were kicking and screaming. I wanted to have fun with my children, so I bought a monkey backpack. It went okay the first 2 times. After that, my child would lie on the floor and shout, "No monkey backpack," so that was the end of trying to get them to wear it. Dragging a child around a store does not look good. I really feel for the mother whose child went into the gorilla enclosure and the zoo had to shoot the gorilla. It made me glad I never took my child to the zoo when they were little. My child probably would have ended up in the gorilla enclosure too. If you have not had that kind of child, you do not know what it is like. I am so glad they grew out of it. Story 103. My child, who has autism spectrum disorder and attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, had one from about 3 years old. He would elope, running into roads, crowds, or water. We only used it for high-risk situations, such as walking by busy roads or attending large events like fairs. Eventually, he learned more about safety awareness and we learned techniques to help him. For example, instead of yelling, "Stop," when he started to run, it was more effective to say, "Walk." He would usually slow to a walk. Yelling, "Stop," often made him run faster, as if he thought someone was chasing him. Giving a clear instruction of what to do was better than telling him what not to do. Instead of saying, "Don't let go of my hand," say, "Hold my hand." Instead of, "Don't run off," say, "Stay on the sidewalk." You can also use a fun distraction when you sense they are about to bolt. For example, "Can you jump over this spot?" Story 104. I put leashes on my children. They were runners, and I did not care who had something to say. Story 105. I think they are brilliant for airports and amusement parks. Story 106. I still think it is better than children being kidnapped at a crowded mall. Story 107. My daughter, whom I jokingly called my leash daughter, is now 14, plays multiple sports, is class president, and is an A student with a great sense of humor. That leash saved her but many times. I am glad I used it so I could get to know this great teenager. Story 108. My siblings and I all had to wear them because we were runners. We outnumbered our parents, so if all 3 of us had decided to take off at the same time, it would have been bad. We turned out fine. I think they are a great thing because they keep children safe, especially in crowded areas. Story 109. My sister and I were Irish twins, and my dad was often away for work, so baby leashes made sense when I was growing up and still do. Baby leashes are about safety, not humiliation, and I have no problem with them. Story 110. I was a child who would run and hide for sport. I would watch my mom have a breakdown and not come out. This was when I was a toddler or in early elementary school. I have no memory of this. Story 111. I am a 68-year-old female. I was a wanderer, the only way my mom could keep me close. I was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder later in life. Story 112. We leashed our kids and never lost them. They are grown now, have families of their own, and I have no regrets. Story 113. My daughter did it at Disneyland. She is tiny and was walking all over, so it made sense. I didn't want to lose her. Story 114. I do not remember it, so it did not affect me except that it probably saved my life. Story 115. As a young punk, I thought it was stupid and somewhat degrading to put a child on a leash. Now, many years later, as a parent, I understand. No judgment. Story 116. Well, Harambe might still be alive if that child had been on a leash. Rest in peace. Story 117. I do not know why this is a big deal. My mother would put it on my wrist when we went through the airport. I thought it was pretty fun. Laughing out loud. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.